of you for her previous talks at Mountain Cloud, as well as her work and teaching all around. So for those of you who don't know, just a word about Maria. She is a Sambo Zen teacher, teaching at Maria Cannon Zen Center in Dallas, Texas, and also the guiding teacher of the Sophia Zen Center in South Bend, Indiana. Along with her Zen training and teaching, Maria's interfaith work is wide and deep. Just really, her bio is awesome. She serves as International Program Director of the Museum of World Religions in Taipei, and also the US representative of the Elijah Interfaith Institute. So Maria organizes and takes part in conferences on interfaith themes, including Buddhist-Muslim dialogues. Many of them have been sponsored and are sponsored by Dharma Master Xingdao. Maria took refuge with Master Xingdao in 1983 and has been translating for him all around the world, really his principal translator. She's also had, of course, work in academia, PhD, and she has served as adjunct faculty at Southern Methodist University here in Dallas, teaching courses on East Asian history, Asian religions, and spirituality. Her PhD is from the University of Munich, and she also studied in Taipei and Kyoto, Japan. So that accounts for, well, together with Maria, if you know her, it accounts for her incredible fluency in Japanese and Chinese and multiple other languages. Yeah, such a heart of understanding. Maria is married to Reis Habito, who is well known here at Mountain Cloud. And together they have 2 sons, beautiful young men who are studying and working in Austin, Texas, and now sheltering together in the wake of this big storm. So we're so happy to have you here tonight, Maria. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for this very gracious introduction. And wow, that sounds like an impressive person. I wonder who she is. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to Mountain Cloud and to Valerie for giving me this opportunity to be with you again. And I'm also very happy that tonight we have some of our members from the Sophia Zen Center and also from our Maria Cannon Zen Center, I believe, among us. So thank you to all of you for giving me this time and for being together here tonight. And I'm also very grateful actually that we have electricity at home because, you know, many people in Texas and other parts of the US are suffering from the cold right now. And so I would like us to really open our hearts to them and keep them in our hearts, to not forget and to be one with them. Thank you. So tonight I want to start my talk with that question of what is it really that brings us to Zen meditation? And as you know, from your own experiences, there are different motivations that bring us to Zen practice. You may have started with out of curiosity. Perhaps we came across a book or a film on Zen, or somebody talked to us about Zen and got us interested in trying it out for ourselves. But in my case, it was my first Buddhist teacher, Shifu, that Valerie also mentioned, Master Xingdao, whom I spoke about last time. I met him 40 years ago in Taiwan when he was totally unknown, a hermit meditating in graveyards by a lake. And after a year of visiting him at the hermitage, I told him that I wanted to write a master's thesis on Chinese Buddhism at Munich University. He said to me, you know, unless you really start practicing Zen meditation, you will just make a new book out of many other books. And you still won't understand what Buddhism is really about. So that motivated me to start sitting on my own and looking for a Zen teacher after my return to Germany. But by then I had already experienced that reading books on Zen or on Buddhism only gets me this far. And that's why. On one occasion, in the early days, I arrived at the hermitage with some fruits and flowers for Shifu. And he took them for me and put them on the altar before a white-clad seated figure that looked to me like a Madonna. And then he offered up incense and bowed in front of her. Now, from one of the books I had been reading on Zen, I was so very clever. And I knew that there is no worship of idols in Zen Buddhism. That's how the book put it. And so I was bewildered and I asked Shifu, what are you doing? I thought there is no worship of idols in Buddhism. Who is that? And he looked at me with that wide open smile and said, that's not an idol. That's you. That's me. I was utterly confused. So what in the world do I, a young woman from Germany, have in common with this Chinese figure on the altar of a Buddhist hermitage? There you have a wonderful life koan. This is you. This is me. So Shifu then explained that this figure is the Bodhisattva Guanyin or Kanzeon, that Bodhisattva of great compassion, born of the wisdom of emptiness, that Bodhisattva who listens to the cries of the world and responds with compassion. Really? That's me? How so? So some of us may not have had this kind of mind-boggling or challenging experience that brings them to Zen. But no matter for what reasons you come to Zen, you will find that your practice starts to deepen when you bring this very earnest question to it. Who am I? Who am I really? And how can I live my life to the full? How can I really be at home with myself and the universe? And so for some of us, sitting only or shikantaza helps us to shed light on these questions. And for others, it's a practice with the koan. And so even though the koans are about encounters between Zen masters and students, mostly monks who lived far away from us in China, in a very different culture and at a very different time, these koans in reality are about each of us. Each koan is about you, because it sheds light on that infinite horizon that is your true nature at all times. And it cuts through those things that keep you from realizing it, from living it out in compassion. And so my talk today is on a koan that actually I have never so much related to or liked before, even though it's one of the famous ones appearing in the Gateless Gate, the Blue Cliff record, and also the Book of Serenity. The title is Nansen Kills the Cat. And the fact that it's taken up in these different three collections that we go through in the course of our koan study allows us to grapple with it at various times in our practice, which means also at various stages in our life. So in my case, that koan found its way back to me before Christmas last year, when I was translating my earlier English version of Yamada Rion's teisho on the case as it appears in the Book of Serenity or the Shoyoroku, when I was translating that into German. And so when I had almost finished the German version of this rather lengthy text, it's lengthy only because it includes a long verse at the end, I somehow pushed the wrong button while typing, and that whole text disappeared and was not to be retrieved again. That was really so frustrating. I had no choice but to do a retranslation. But you know what? Actually, being forced to work on exactly the same text twice turned out to be a gift, because it helped me to pay more attention to the content and ask some new questions about it that I had not asked before. So to see it from a different angle. And here's the case, I'll read it to you. Presenting. Once the monks of the Eastern and Western Zen halls in Nansen's temple were quarreling about a cat. As he saw this, Nansen held up the cat and said, "You monks, if one of you can say a word, I will not slay the cat." No one could answer. Nansen cut the cat into two. Nansen told Joshu what had happened and asked him for his view. Joshu thereupon took his sandals, put them upon his head, and went away. Nansen said, "If you had been there, I could have spared the cat." So the two masters who appear in the koan, of course, rather famous, Nansen or Nanchen, was the teacher of Joshu or Chaozhou, who practiced under his guidance for 40 years. And when Nansen died at the age of 87, Joshu was already 60 years old. And rather than staying at the temple and starting a teaching career there on his own, Joshu left everything behind and went on a long trip, traveling around the country, seeking out other Zen masters to learn from them and to deepen his own Zen experience. So this, in spite of the fact that he was said to have had his first deep experience at the age of 18, and then several other ones later on. But so seeing Joshu's inner freedom and flexibility, not being glued to, not being stuck in the same place where he had spent the last 40 years of his life, and then his deep dedication to practice, and that humility in wanting to learn from other teachers, that really helps to put our own efforts into perspective, doesn't it? So practice really never ends. It has no beginning and it goes on endlessly. As Yamada Kon Woshi one day reminded those of us who were Christians, he said, "If one day you arrive in heaven, please don't forget to continue your practice even there." But so anyway, to come back to Joshu at age 80, he finally felt ready to take on his own students and taught until the age of 120. And I think all of us know that that very first koan that's given to a student who starts practice with the koan is Joshu's dog, or also called the koan Mu. But now let's come back to Nansen Kills the Cat. So there were monks from two different parts of Nansen's temple loudly quarreling about a cat. And teachers comment on this scene by saying that we don't really know exactly what the problem was, but that the monks most likely were fighting over the question of whether a cat has Buddha nature or not, or if there is a difference between the cat and myself. That may be so, but there might also be some other explanation. For example, some years ago, the nuns at my monastery in Taiwan had found a little ill kitten, which they nursed back to life and loved so deeply. They put a little red mantra charm necklace around its neck, and then they took care of it as if it was their own child. They also told me that that cat was the reincarnation of a spiritual practitioner, and that's the reason why it had really found its way up to the monastery. And there it was always to be found in the beautiful visitor hall, sitting there very regally. So in any case, the cat was the delight of everyone in that monastery. So it could be imagined, or it's imaginable that those monks were simply fighting about where the cat should stay, in the Eastern or Western hall, or who's supposed to take care of it, Or perhaps there was also a faction that did not want to keep that cat. Perhaps it was catching the birds instead of the mice. Or perhaps it was causing allergies, who knows? Or again, during a Zen retreat we held with Yamada Ryon Roshi in Israel many years ago, there was a wonderful cat that was always inside the Zendo when we were sitting, simply coming in, and then eventually lying down behind one or the other of the students. And I don't recall who exactly decided that this was not appropriate. And so, to the regret of so many participants, the Zendo door was closed and the cat was kept outside. So who knows, perhaps the monks were loudly discussing something like this. In any case, Nansen, seeing that this cat is the object of the monks' opposing views, of their attachments or aversion, in any case, the object of their quarrels, holds it up by the neck for everyone to see, and then knife in hand. With this scene, now I cannot help but think of the biblical scene of King Solomon, who has to render judgment in the case of two women who are fighting over a baby, with both of them claiming that they are the true mother of this child. What does King Solomon do? He holds up the child with one hand and then a sword with the other one, and he says, "Since you cannot agree, I will cut this child into half so that both of you can take your part home." So Nansen holds up the cat and says, "You monks, if one of you can say an appropriate word, I will not kill this cat." But the monks are frozen in place, shocked, not knowing what to say at all. Do you sometimes find yourself in a situation like that too? Something very unexpected is happening in your life, and you are completely frozen in place, stuck, unable to move or say anything. But is that what happened with the two mothers fighting about the baby when Solomon held up his sword? Not at all. One of them cried, "Yes, go ahead, split that child into two." But the real mother cried, "Please, don't harm the child, give it to the other woman." And with this, Solomon had found the real mother, the one whose heart, as the Bible says, was burning with compassion, the one who truly loved her child and was ready to give it up to the other woman to save its life. And so actually her readiness to act, to surrender the child, saved the child's life. And she acted from that heart of her canon nature, from that heart of compassion, which is always life-giving, not life-taking. But now let's come back to these monks, the practitioners under Nansen. They did not know what to say when Nansen held up the cat. I wondered, how is that possible? You see, that story happened towards the end of Nansen's life, when Joshu was about 60 years old. And we can assume that Nansen had taught many of these monks for many years. But then, what good did their practice do at that point? Were they so shocked that they didn't know how to move? Or were they afraid of saying something wrong, which might be criticized as not being appropriate? Namely, not being said perhaps from the perspective of Zen or enlightenment, and so they kept their mouths shut? Or were they also self-conscious, so concerned about themselves that they did not intervene with a single word? Did they have so many concepts on their mind, what a Zen-like answer might be, that they really failed in a real life and death situation? Or again, were their hearts hardened by that fight they just had? But again, how could all of this be the outcome of so many years of practice? Now, if you were there, no matter if you are a beginner in Zen or a seasoned practitioner, what would you say? So seeing that no one could answer, Nansen cut that cat into two. So the commentaries on Nansen's action range from, well, he did not really kill the cat. He just pretended to do so too. No, whether he killed the cat or not is not essential. In killing the cat, Nansen clearly shows the monks the world of emptiness, that world of our essential nature, which is beyond our concept of life and death, beyond our distinction between them. So Nansen's killing the cat is an act of his great compassion, his way of showing, of demonstrating to the monks this world beyond life and death, this world beyond their concepts. Ha! But we don't know if this action really shocked the monks into awakening, because there is no comment saying that the monks attained realization. Explain this act of killing the cat as a way of showing that world of mu, that world of emptiness, beyond life and death, does have a problematic aspect too that we need to be aware of. So many of you may know that Japanese Buddhist clergy fully supported the Japanese nationalistic war effort during the Second World War. And it's precisely that rationale. There is this world of emptiness, beyond life and death, this world where there is no death, there is nobody to kill and nobody to be killed. That this dangerous notion, when used in the wrong way, helped Japanese clergy, Zen masters among them, to justify the war effort and the killing. So there is a book on this topic by Brian Victoria entitled Zen at War, which you may want to have a look at if you have never heard about that aspect of Zen in Japan. Namely, how even the enlightenment experience of our ancestors in the practice, and Yasutani Roshi was among those who wholeheartedly supported the war effort. How really that experience could have taken such a problematic, such a deadly turn. So could there be any other explanation for Nansen's action other than showing the world of no life and death, that world of our true nature in that very act of killing? I think there is. So holding up the cat and asking for an appropriate word to save it, Nansen was checking on the clarity of the monk's eyes and the maturity of their actions. You cannot have one without the other. So failing to say anything at all because they were stuck in emptiness, or so self-conscious, so afraid of exposing themselves to criticism by doing or saying the wrong thing, the monks simply failed to save the cat's life. So if there is one lesson the monks had to learn about immature practice, that's the one. Don't ever be stuck on a notion of Zen, on emptiness of yourself, and then unable to do the right thing at the right moment. There are so many situations in life where we may easily feel stuck. And this feeling of being stuck under close scrutiny turns out to originate much more in our own mind and emotions, in our ways of thinking about reality rather than the reality itself. Because that reality in truth is always dynamic, that is free from obstacles. We may feel stuck in a relationship, or in a situation at work, or on making the right decision on how to move forward in life. And of course, many of us have experienced that feeling of being stuck because of the restrictions that the corona epidemic has imposed on us. It also feels that as a country, We are stuck in this political divide between the different sides, stuck to a degree that really became shockingly visible in the events of the storming of the Capitol this past January 6th. So wouldn't we wish we had Nansen's knife to cut through that situation and set us free? Actually, we do have that kind of knife to set us free. It's our practice. Our practice is always empowered by the Bodhisattva vows. And the first one says, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. How can we free others if we cannot free ourselves? So this being stuck mostly has to do with something that we are holding on to from the past, or our deep-seated fears and anxiety about change, about the future. Those things that prevent us from confidently and freely moving on. So when we do our practice, we calm and focus our mind on our breath. We deeply enter into silence or dissolve in mu. And doing so, we always come back to, we open up that wide open horizon in our heart and mind that is unconditioned, luminous, free from obstacles, free from our preferences, fear, and judgment. It's here in that wide open space, without any barriers, that we come home to just what is and experience it completely free from those usual habitual filters in our mind. It is here that peace and joy arise, this pure, joyful, true self, as the chant about Kanzeon says. Joyful because all the worries about the small I, me, mine have vanished. This small self itself is gone. It has been transformed into the big self, in which that wall between me here and the world out there has completely disappeared. And I think that all of you have already experienced this to a certain degree, because this big self really is our true nature. It's that what Shifu pointed out to me in that figure of Kannon, that bodhisattva of compassion. I think this whole process of becoming unstuck can take many forms. But I think no matter what the specific life situation may be, that process still reflects the dynamics of this koan. Let me give you one example. When I was a doctoral student in Kyoto many years ago, I had been doing research and work on a certain text for my dissertation for almost 1 year. Until the day I received an email from a scholar in England who had been working on that same text longer than me and told me that he was going to finish his dissertation too soon. So getting that kind of news, I was really shocked, speechless, frozen. Looking at my computer screen, just like Nansen's monks were looking at the cat and the knife. And 1,000 thoughts were racing through my mind. What should I think? What should I do? I think I should just go home and forget about all of this. And so that evening, I went to meditation at my little temple in Kyoto as usual. And it's really there that things started to move. That this shock, this frozenness in place started to melt. And so letting all of my worries, all of my regrets just rest in mu, dissolve in mu. I came clearly to realize what? I actually still had 1 more year left of my scholarship. And so there was a way forward. I would just find a new topic to work on. And with that realization, I left the temple. I jumped The moon outside was bright, and for some reason my heart was so light. A way forward. Joshu putting the sandals on his head and just walking away. And actually then the topic I found, or the topic that found me, was much better for me. I was on the great compassion mantra of the Bodhisattva Kanzeon. So that Bodhisattva Kanzeon with 1,000 arms and eyes, boundless compassion. But I would enjoy to give you another, more colorful example about the dynamics of becoming unstuck. It's a story. For Christmas, a friend of mine in Germany had sent me a book entitled Chick, and I checked, and the English title is Why We Took the Car Away. So this is a youth novel which is written from the perspective of the narrator, Mike Klingenberg, who is a 14-year-old high school student who's literally stuck at home during his summer vacation. He's left by his mother, who is in treatment for alcoholism, and abandoned by his father, who uses that very occasion to take off for 2 weeks with his younger secretary. He just trusts that Mike can take care of himself in their big house with a nice garden and a pool. But Mike, as so many 14-year-olds, is stuck in so many ways. He has low self-esteem, since he's not one of the popular boys in class. He has no friends, and he is secretly in love with Tatiana, a girl that invites almost everyone in class to her much anticipated birthday party, except for Mike and Chick. Chick, who is an immigrant from Russia, a sojourner, a newcomer in class. So Chick lives in Germany with an older brother, without his parents, and survives on some type of social security for immigrants. And at school, he keeps everyone at bay, seemingly not interested in making friends at all. Fine so far, you might think, but what does this story really have to do with Nansen and the cat? So in this story, Tatiana, the girl Mike is secretly in love with, represents Nansen, the one person who makes Mike feel completely stuck in place, unable to move. And it's that very fact that ultimately challenges Mike to face the situation and get on with life. So thinking that he would eventually get an invitation to Tatiana's birthday party, Mike has worked for weeks on a black and white drawing of Beyoncé, the pop singer that Tatiana likes, to present it to her as a birthday gift. But when school lets out for the summer and he still has not received the invite, he completely breaks down. He throws himself on his bed at home, alone, crying his eyes out. And then he takes scissors to cut his drawing into 2 pieces, only to reconsider later and glue the pieces back together again. Now, who appears next on that scene is Chick. And even though Mike is reluctant to even to talk to him in the beginning, he feels touched when he realizes that Chick has some human concern for him. Chick sees the drawing which had been cut apart and glued together again and understands everything intuitively. So he convinces Mike to get out of the house, stop by at that birthday party, even though they are not invited, and just give that drawing to Tatiana anyway. Mike protests. He's out of his wits with fear. But somehow Chick gets him into the car, which turns out to be stolen, and to face his greatest challenge and fear, Tatiana and her reaction. On his own, Mike would never have dared to face her like this, but he would have stayed home instead, wallowing in his misery. So Tatiana accepts the present with pleased surprise, and before she can say much, Mike and Chick quickly jump back into the stolen car and then start a summer road trip with many adventures that glue Mike and Chick together as best friends. And it's really during that car trip, I'm thinking of Joshu's trip, but here it's during this car trip that Mike comes completely out of his little self-enclosed shell and opens up to, or to put it better still, is opened up by the universe. Now he learns to notice, to pay attention, to the sunset, its beauty, that sunset in the mountains, or the boundlessness of the night sky, that light of the stars, that world beyond space and time. And then also in the morning, the dew on the field, the song of the birds at sunrise. And he notices the expressions in people's faces, their voices, their body language. In other words, he's no longer focused on himself and his own misery. And he becomes more intimate with the world, finding himself at home in it, growing in self-confidence, reaching out to people, experiencing companionship and joy. So then the fact that this adventure trip ends with a serious car crash, that the police comes to arrest the car thieves, that Mike's father angrily slaps him in the face, completely unable to understand his son. All of that changes nothing in the fact that Mike has seen and experienced this wide world outside of him in completely new and intimate ways, no longer separate, but full of beauty, of drama, of wonder, of mystery, of adventure. He has found his place in it. He has found a praise, and he has found that freedom to move on. So then in the last scene of the story, Mike's mother, whom he loves and admires in spite of everything, has returned home from her treatment. She happily reunites with Mike and then starts putting that previous world of this home, where she was trapped in an unhappy marriage, on its head by throwing things into the pool. Empty old whiskey bottles, small table, TV, flower pots, and so on. Mike very happily wants to join her in throwing things after a moment of hesitation. But at that very moment, two policemen appear who have been alerted by the neighbors. The mother and Mike, still with the chair in his arms, spontaneously jump into the pool. And from deep below where they are, with those green bubbles rising up all around them, Mike relives the memories of this best summer he ever had in his life because of Chick. Until then, he sees the outlines of the two policemen hovering over the pool, speaking, as Mike says, in a silent, foreign language, in a different world. And I was bursting with happiness. You can't hold your breath forever, but for a long time. So that's the end of the story. So Mike has been freed from that world that had kept him stuck in fear and misery before. That different world out there, as he says, with that silent, foreign language. But at this point, I want to come back to the koan again. So Nansen told Joshu what had happened. We heard that, and asked him for his view. Joshu thereupon took his sandals, put them upon his head, and went away. Nansen said, "If you had been there, I could have spared the cat." So Joshu must have been away from the monastery when Nansen killed the cat. And so then when he returned, Nansen just told him about the incident and asked him about his point of view. And Joshu just took his sandals, which he had probably left in front of the door when entering the room, put them on his head, and quickly walked away. So different from all of the other monks, Joshu is not stuck at all in that situation, neither in his mind and not in his body. There is no self-consciousness there at all. No Joshu, no hindrance, no judgment about things that have already happened, no hesitation whatsoever. So in walking out of the door with his sandals on his head, Joshi fully embodies, or he fully shows us this limitless activity, that spontaneity, which is the very function, which is that way of being of our true nature, that way of being of the universe, that limitless dynamic activity, which is expressed as abiding nowhere, mind comes forth, abiding nowhere, arising nowhere, coming forth. Arising nowhere, the monks are bewildered and stuck. Arising nowhere, Nansen holds up the cat and kills the cat. Arising nowhere, Joshu picks up his sandals and walks away. Arising nowhere, Chick appears in a stolen car and frees Mike from his teenage angst. Arising nowhere, the stars are bright in the night. The bird's song announces the morning. The dewdrop glitters on a leaf. Arising nowhere. Getting up, sitting down, just now listening to a teisho, wondering, laughing, crying. Arising nowhere. Arising right here. Nansen says, if you had been there, I could have saved the cat. That is addressed to each and every one of us. Now, what is your answer out of that heart of compassion? That is the end of my teisho. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. There's a saying in Zen, the monks' mouths are stuck to the wall. But we do want to say thank you.
Thank you again. And thank you for listening and being there. I hope I did not go over time, but I wanted to tell the story. It touched me very deeply. And as I said, when you go through these koans, and there are certain situations in life that you go through yourself, or perhaps it's something that you read at the time. And again, you go through and you see different angles, and something just speaks to you and it opens you up. And it happened to me. And I hope you can share that with me.
Thank you so much for sharing your boundless heart of this practice, for evoking that infinite horizon and inviting us in, like into the pool.
Into the pool, jump. Yes.
Boundless gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.